Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. It is the 15th of April, Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Welcome to the show, Socioeconomics. Thank you for joining me. Well, good morning, everybody. Here we are, finally. It's the weekend. Saturday. It's going to be a really nice day out there again today. Weather-wise, clear blue skies, warm temperatures. So get out there and enjoy the day. Well, I think it's really important to discuss social issues. In our society, and the factors that play a role when it comes to minorities, racial minorities. So, first of all, the socioeconomic status it encompasses not just income, but also our educational attainment, to our financial security. So, education, employment, housing, even healthcare. And the affordability of just, for even just our necessities, and how it affects our society. So the socioeconomic status can encompass quality of life, attributes as well as opportunities, privileges afforded to people within society. Poverty specifically is not a single factor, but rather is characterized by multiple physical and physiosocial stressors, consistent and reliable predictors of the vast array of outcomes across the lifespan, including physical, physiological health, and it's relevant to all the realms of behavioral and social science, including research, practice, education, and advocacy, and the effects on our society with the overall human functioning, including our physical and mental health. And ultimately affects our society with the inequalities of health distribution, resource distribution, and our quality of lives are increasing globally. Society benefits from an increased focus on the foundations of the social economical inequalities. So the impacts of the lives of many ethnic and racial minorities with discrimination and the marginalization and the discrimination and marginalizations can serve as a hindrance to an upward mobility of the ethnic and racial minorities seeking to escape poverty. Now, it's not just um, so with indigenous, African American, Latino children. Because we can look, so we can look at, so we look at and we can include the LGBTQ plus two spirited. When it comes to discrimination and the marginalizations, racist. We can look at the here in Canada in the mid 1800s, and it was just mind boggling to me when I started reading about the residential schools here in Canada, and they were called Indian schools in the United States at that time. So children were forcefully removed from their homes, placed in residential schools, stripped of their heritage, their culture, their language. Physical, mental, sexual abuse. And to, because, myself growing up, there was no such thing as technology that we have today. Nor were we taught anything of history of the residential school systems here in Canada. The very first time, and I'm honest about this, the very first time that I heard the word residential schools, it was about the mid 90s when our prime minister, I believe it was Stephen Harper, who apologized for the mistreatment of the Indigenous people of Canada, referring to the residential schools. And so today, with the technology we have, the call it the World Wide Web or call it the internet, you can research this information now. So I'm thinking, okay, well, if I were going to be talking about residential schools, and I was like that, well, then I'm going to have to go and I'm going to have to research and what they were. So from the mid 1800s, the last residential school closed in 1995 here in Canada. And I'm thinking to myself and reading about the residential schools, and I said, how in the hell could this happen? How could it even last that long? So, in the United States, 39% of African American children and adolescents and 30% of Latino children and adolescents are living in poverty, which is more than double the 14% poverty rate of non-Latino, white, and Asian children. And the minority racial groups are more likely to experience multidimensional poverty than their white counterparts. Well, I mean, okay, well then look back at the history of the United States with blacks and discrimination. Forced into labor, in the cotton fields. And it's just this is just it's mind-boggling. It's disturbing that if you look back in that era that a white person could own another human being and force them into labor. It's mind-boggling. It's really disturbing. And the same goes with the indigenous people of Canada and the American Indian, of how they were treated throughout these residential schools and Indian schools. So, with the American Indian, Alaskan Native, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiian families are more likely than Caucasian and Asian families to live in poverty. And although the income of Asian American families often falls markedly above other minorities, these families are often four to five family members are working. So African Americans at 53%, Latinos at 43% are more likely to receive a high cost mortgage than Caucasians. African American employment rates are typically double that of Caucasian Americans, and let's not leave out indigenous people as well. Other ethnic groups, and even people of the LGBTQ. When it comes to education, so socioeconomics is education, income, housing, just to name three. When it comes to the education, despite the dramatic changes, large gaps remain when minority education attainment and outcomes are compared to white people. African Americans and Latinos are more likely to attend high poverty schools. They're living in high poverty neighborhoods, underfunded public schools, than those of people, are generally classified in higher class. Obviously, it's unfortunate. Whites in wealthier neighborhoods are going to have fully funded schools. Now, this is going back even, far as 2013, so in the 2000s, the dropout rates between racial groups narrowed significantly. However, high school dropout rates among Latinos remain the highest, followed by African Americans and then whites. So, with the social economic realities that may deprive students of valuable resources, high achieving African American students may be exposed to less rigorous curriculums, attend schools with fewer resources, and have teachers who expect less of them academically than they expect of the similar situated Caucasian students. And then we think, well, why? Why would they have? Why would they have less rigorous um, curriculums? Why would they have schools with fewer resources? It's kind of difficult to understand that because um, I guess to just figure that whether you were black, uh, you're an indigenous person, that they just figure you're not going to learn anyway. It's ridiculous to even for someone even to think that way. You know, so in addition to the socioeconomic realities that may deprive students of valuable resources, right? So 12.4% of African American college graduates between the ages of 22 and 27 were unemployed, which is more than double the rate of the unemployment among college graduates in the same range, 5.6%. So with the socioeconomical, in our physical health, institutional discrimination creates barriers to healthcare access. We see this in Canada as well. Even with stigmatized groups can access care, cultural racism reduces the quality of care they receive. It's and we hear about this. We hear here in Canada. We hear it, you know, um, quite a bit, for healthcare access. I mean, here in Canada, okay, people, in the United States and other parts of the world thinking, oh, well, Canada has free healthcare. Well, it's it's not. How do I explain this? We pay taxes, right? We pay taxes in the United States. You pay taxes in Europe and stuff like that. Our tax dollars goes to our healthcare system. But when they're talking about creates those barriers of healthcare access, it, it, it comes it comes down to it comes down to discrimination. Whether you're black, whether you're indigenous, it comes down to discrimination, and we see it across the board here in Canada. People who have addictions, you know, of other races than whites, they are tended to be treated more poorly in the healthcare system than whites, as though it's their fault that they have an addiction. And even when it comes to education, and despite the changes, large gaps remain when minority education attainment and outcomes are compared to whites. So again, African Americans and Latinos are more likely to attend high poverty schools. So underfunded. They don't have the resources. And the mentality of teaching in those underfunded schools, stuff like that, is as though is that they already, the teachers would feel, well, you're already behind the eight ball anyhow. So what does it matter? Well, it matters a lot. Here in the 2000s, the dropout rates between racial groups narrowed significantly, right? So, but the school dropout rates among Latinos remain the highest, followed by African Americans, and then Caucasian. And like I said, with the social economical realities that may deprive students of valuable resources. On our physical health, with the institution discriminations in our hospitals, it's creating barriers to healthcare access. Stigmatized groups, so even when stigmatized groups can access care, cultural racism reduces the quality of care they receive. Like I said, we see it across the board here in Canada. Racial and ethnic minorities have worse overall health than that of whites. Health disparities may stem from economic determinants. Well, in the United States, you have to have health insurance. Now, I'm wondering too. I mean, there has to be, a hospital that is gonna take you anyways, and you shouldn't have to pay for it out of pocket. You have. I heard that in the United States you have copay to visit your family doctor. Now, The other thing when it comes to, racial and the ethnic minorities, that they have worse overall health, with the health disparities may stem from the economical temperaments with education, the geography, and the neighborhood, lower quality care, inadequate access to care, inability to navigate the system, provider ignorance or bias, and the socioeconomic status and the race and the ethnics have been associated with avoidable procedures, avoidable hospitalizations, and untreated disease. And at each level of income or education, African Americans have worse outcomes than whites. And this could be due to the adverse health effects of more concentrated disadvantages of the range of experience related to racial and bias. And here we are in the 21st century. And to me, not much has changed, if anything has changed. When it comes to the socioeconomic, when we're talking, about race and ethnics. So the substantial race differences in insurance in insurance coverage in the pre-retirement years. Hispanics and American Indians are much less likely than whites, African Americans, and Asians to have any health insurance. That's just ridiculous. You know, so when we go back to the education, underfunded schools, not given the resources, well, because they're probably not going to learn it anyways. I mean, that's just seems to be the attitude. So when people are living in poverty, when it comes to nutrition, they're not getting the nutrition that they need. For instance, a box of cereal, for kids. I mean, you might as well just pour some sugar in the bowl, pour milk on that sugar, and give it to your kids because there's no nutritional value in it whatsoever. Matter of fact, it's just detrimental to their health. Not being able to have a nutritional a breakfast or a lunch or even a dinner affects can affect your learning abilities. I mean, I can't think on an empty stomach because all I'm doing is thinking about food. You're unable to concentrate on the task at hand because you have no energy. There has been no energy stored for later in the day. The inability to concentrate and think. So the psychological health and the socioeconomic economic being deprived and racial discrimination have been implicated in the higher psychological distress. So wealthy particularly explains racial and the ethnic difference in depression. Navigate the net worth, zero net worth, and not owning a home in young adulthood are significantly associated with depressive symptoms. Now, that also goes for to people, um, not just we're talking about Hispanics or the African Americans, people of the LGBTQ, and of course even with whites, um, when it comes to um, I guess your IQ, it is also measured in outcomes of employment and housing and the ability to sustain yourself, you know, with proper nutrition. But poverty, it runs deeper with other racial groups. Yes, there are whites living in poverty, but more so in other racial groups and ethnics. So, so they did some research on the post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, indicates that African American, Hispanics, Asians American, Indians, and Native Hawaiians have a higher rate of PTSD than whites, which are not accounted by the FCS and their history of the psychiatric disorders. American Indians are at the heightened risk of post traumatic stress disorder and alcohol dependence. Same here in Canada with the Indigenous people. So, what do we do? When it comes to ethnic and racial minorities and the socioeconomic status? Well, here in Canada, when it comes to the educational system, um, if you want post secondary education and you're a minority, or so Indigenous people, don't have to pay for education. They want to go to college or they want to go to university. But then all the barriers that they face. and not at fault of their own. So I know you probably heard back. It was last summer. Pope Francis came to Canada. Because the indigenous community, um, went to Rome to visit the Pope and talk about um, residential schools, and they wanted an apology from the Catholic Church. They wanted an apology from the Pope. So the Pope came to Canada last July and toured Canada, and he toured the indigenous communities. In hopes that, he would apologize on behalf of the Catholic Church, of their involvement in the residential school system, of the mistreatment of the indigenous people of Canada. See, back in the mid 1800s, our first prime minister, Sir Frederick A. MacDonald, um, quoted, I don't know if I get his quote exact, but um, he said that um, although an Indian can read and write, the Indian is still a savage. This was the mindset back then. I guess, for what they were trying to achieve, as bringing the indigenous people, I mean, they were called Indians then, up to the standards of whites. It didn't have the outcome or the effects that they were hoping for. And because of the mistreatment, physical, mental, sexual, it's, and then you look at the United States, they don't fare any better. The treatment, the treatment of blacks throughout history, and now other minority groups, people from the Middle East, people from India, or whatever the case may be, with the racial that is going on in today's society. And here we're living in the 21st century. And racism still runs rampant. So even with look, we've had an uptick in people attacking mosques, an uptick in people harassing, insulting people of the LGBTQ. Poverty for people in the LGBTQ, people of minorities, ethnic, still today runs rampant. So it does have a huge impact on our society with overall human functioning, including our physical and our mental health. So so it does correlate, such as lower education achievements, poverty, and poor health. It ultimately affects our society. On our health care. It puts a real burden on our healthcare system. And not only that, I mean, the discriminatory, in our healthcare system. And we've seen it time and time again. You're treated differently because of your economic status. If you're high on the hierarchy of income, well, the outcomes are so much greater for you when it comes to your mental health and physical health, employment and income achievements. And then you have, your middle class. So what is that? You have the white collar, you have the blue collar, what else do we have? Well, we go down to lower class. I mean, to be up in the higher income brackets, you know, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a physicist. And you also have the IQ to back that up. So people of racial minorities and ethnic, can even include gender, are going to fall into that poverty category. It has, so in society, um, it does affect, you know, our healthcare. Because, it costs a lot more money for treatment. When it comes to addictions. It's costing the community, for people who um, on the streets, within the homeless community. And our overall health, because we stand in that status of wealth and education. Today, with the cost of everything, and specifically when it comes to food, shelter, every time, I read the news about something, it comes up, evictions. What kind of evictions? Rental evictions. And it's directed towards people who are on lower incomes, who are on a disability, who might be on government assistance. Because these landlords or property owners, whatever, want more money for rent. This is one way of getting people out of there. And they're willing to pay the fines that go with it because they've broken the rules. Because if you're a landlord and you're doing a rental and the tenant has to move out, and that tenant's only paying the marginal rent, not market rate, and you're only doing it because you want market rate, the tenants have first right to move back in when the rentals are done at the rate they were paying. And that doesn't happen. And they're willing to pay the fines for an illegal eviction. They're not going to target people who are obviously paying full market rent. They're going to target other minorities and their socioeconomic status. And we're seeing this across the board here in Canada. And I read these stories, and it's just heartbreaking. It's not just people who, people, for Caucasians. It's everybody, every race. But it just seems to be those people who are on these low incomes or on a disability. They're being targeted by these landlords or these big corporations that owns these properties. Because they want more money. So yeah, it does have, so for lower income, for lower education, it has a huge effect on our society. So how can we get involved? Well, consider these economics in your education, practice and research efforts. Stay up to date on the legislation and policies that explore the work to eliminate socioeconomic disparities. Visit your government's relations webpage for more details. Visit the Office on Socioeconomical Status website, the Aging website, Office of the Ethnic Minority Affairs website. We can get involved in our communities. We can get involved in our education. So I want to thank you for coming out this morning. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Because I say this because it's a true fact, right? Because, people, you with social media, and you go on all kinds of different platforms, and, you listen to all kinds of different podcasts and things like that, So without you, the listeners, there would be no podcast. So, I do appreciate you for joining my show, for staying on my show for the whole duration, taking the time out of your morning to join the show and listen in. So again, I want to thank you for doing just that. Until then, I guess, it's, I don't know what time it is right now. Oh, it's 10:52 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here in Southern Ontario, Canada. Now it's time for me to get out there to get some things done, and I'm sure you have things that you need to get done. Until we meet again tomorrow morning at now I did put it on for 9 a.m. but then of course I get up and things start to transpire, things start to happen, and it's like, well, I gotta change the time. So I don't know, is it like good between 9 and 10 a.m., within that time, or maybe put it in the middle of 9:30 in the morning? I think that probably would be, go halfway, go in between. So a 9:30 a.m. show tomorrow morning. And that, I like to talk about social issues because there's plenty of it in today's society. I do at times, being a truck driver myself, talk about the trucking industry a little bit and stuff like that. But social issues, I think, far away than what's going on in the trucking industry. So again, I want to thank you for joining me this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Until we meet again. If you can join me, that's great. If you can't, I understand. So until then, take care and be safe. And thank you. Truckers Podcast, FYI. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Enjoy your week.